Hey there, in this video I'm going to show you 5 ways of using a texture lab to take any sound like this and transform it into something much bigger like this. Or like this. All 5 of these methods build upon each other and can be combined in various ways to build the biggest possible sound, so do stick around until the end if you really want to get a big sound. Anyway, I've gone ahead and I've sampled the 8-bit warps onto the texture lab. And for the first method, what I'm going to do is something I showed a little bit of in another video, but I'm going to go into it in more depth here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the blend to about the midway point, this being the blend between our dry original sample and our granular processed sample. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with the speed. For example, we could turn it down to -47. And what that's going to do on the dry side is it's going to slow down our sample so much that it goes down an entire octave. However, over on the granular side of our blend, the original pitch has been preserved. And so if we blend these two things together, we combine the 2 octaves into one note, and we can get an even thicker sound on the granular side if we turn the density all the way up. And depending on the sample that you're working with, it might also benefit you to play around with the size and the shape of the sample. For example, if we turn down the size, we get something a bit more smeared together, but I think I'm actually going to leave it there for this particular sample. Another thing you might want to take a look at is the direction of the playback. Sometimes you can get a more powerful sound if you play it backwards. But with this sample, I don't really hear that much of a difference. So I'm just going to leave it going forward. And then the other thing I'm going to do here is I currently have the reverb off. Let's turn that on. And now if we play our sample blended into 2 octaves, reinforced by the reverb and made stronger by the density of the grains, we end up getting this, which is a bit muddy on the low end, but if we go up an octave, we get quite a nice sound. Now there are many other speeds that you can experiment with. You could also go up an octave, for example. That would be 21, I believe. Or you could go up 2 octaves, all the way up to 63. Or you could do intervals that aren't octaves, for example, fourths or fifths or even thirds, and you can go either down or up with the speed. So for example, 11 would be taking things up a fifth. 7, I believe, would be a fourth. Going down into the negatives, we can go to -33. -42, -38, or one of my favorites, which is going all the way down to -63. And then if you play this just on the neutral octave, middle octave, the low end is going to sound way too muddy. But if you go up a few octaves, you get a very cool sound. And for this one, you might also want to turn the shimmer off, since that is pitching everything up an octave, and we're already pretty high up in the octaves on the higher end. So that would sound like this. So lots to play around with there. And that's just technique number 1. So technique number 2 is taking this same idea that we can layer octaves or different intervals and taking it even further. And for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the speed back up to 0. Or actually, you know what? You could leave it at 0. But to demonstrate how we can combine these methods together, I'm going to go back down to -47, which remember is an octave down. So we sound like this now. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to layer octaves on top of each other, although you could also do this with fourths or fifths or whatever you want. And then I'm going to resample the multi-layered version of my original sample to get something even bigger sounding. So I'm going to start down here and I'm going to hold this note, go up an octave, okay, and now that's going to hold for us, and now I can change the recording source to pattern, turn this back up, and record it. Let's save that, and I'm going to put the speed back up to 0, turned off the blend, I'll leave the reverb on, put back on a little bit of shimmer, and let's hear what we have. That is a pretty big sound already. And there's already some granular stuff kind of baked into this sample because it was there when we resampled our original sample, but there's no reason we can't do some granular stuff again. We could do the first technique again, setting the blend to the middle, turning down the speed to -47, and that's going to sound like this. Another little thing you can do here to kind of accentuate the bigness of the sound is to put some attack on. Let's dial that back to, I don't know, 48, let's try. And this way our sound kind of grows. You can literally hear it getting bigger and bigger. Also, do pay attention to the shimmer. Shimmer can accentuate by adding a whole nother octave above what we're playing on the keyboard, which may or may not be something you want depending on the sample and the sound you're going for. Alright, so this might be something you already thought of, but there is nothing stopping us from doing that whole process again. We could resample our resampling, layering it by octaves, or once again, whatever interval we want. Let's just do octaves again to hear what that sounds like. Save that, re-neutralize everything, and now we have this. If we want to, we can now go back to our first technique and play around with the speed. And I keep repeating -47, but you could switch it up here and we could try -63. Turn our blend back up to the midpoint, go up a few octaves, and let's hear what this sounds like. We could make that even bigger by turning the reverb up a bit. Very, very cool sounds and overtones going on there. And you could repeat that process as many times as you want, but at some point your sound starts getting a bit more diffuse and nebulous. So I'm just going to leave it at that and show you the next technique, which is this. So instead of layering our sounds on the Texture Lab, we're going to go back to our original sound source and we're going to layer the sounds there. Okay, so for this, the 8-bit warps doesn't have a hold function, so I'm going to actually create a pattern where I'm going to layer my octaves together. I realize that doesn't sound particularly nice by itself, but remember, we're just generating material for us to work with. And one of the underlying ideas here is that the more sound we have going on, the more layers, the more sonic information that the Texture Lab receives, the more we can do with that stuff. So I'm going to go back to setting our recording source to line in, and then I'm going to record a sample using this pattern. Save that and re-neutralize everything, or actually I'll leave a little bit of reverb on, and let's hear what that sounds like. So already a much bigger sound right off the bat, and now we can use any of the techniques that we went over before. Putting the blend on the midpoint, for example, going down to -47, making sure our density is up, and let's hear what that sounds like. A really big sound, and then if we wanted, we could resample this using layers on the Texture Lab as I showed you in the second technique. But I think you already get the idea, so instead of that, I'm going to show you another thing you can do using your original sound source. So for this, I'm going to clear a pattern, and then this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to layer octaves again, but this time instead of playing them polyphonically all at the same time, I'm going to arpeggiate the octaves really rapidly. So I'm going to do that with the pattern again. Start here. Go down, go up, I'll just sort of do this randomly. And let's hear what that sounds like. You might want to play around with the release if you're doing this on a synth, although you could also do this on an acoustic instrument, which I'll show you in a moment. Let's just experiment here and try it that way. So I'm going to record that as a sample. Turn down our blend, re-neutralize, and let's hear what this sounds like. Okay, not exactly a big sound, just lots of sound, but we start playing around with the blend and slowing things down. Try our old friend 47. Now we're getting someplace, and this might be a good place to experiment with the direction. Let's try going backwards. Or forward and backwards. And once again, we could employ any of our previous techniques. And let's actually just try that real quick. So I'm going to go down to here, hold this. And let's take a listen to that. Let's try taking this all the way down on the speed. So the more you resample things, the more things get kind of smoothed or smothered out, but you still retain this sort of waveriness to the sound that you didn't have when we layered the octaves polyphonically. So arpeggiation is another option here, and as I mentioned, it also works really great with acoustic instruments. So for example, I took an acoustic guitar and I played the same note at different octaves. Playing them one after another and then all together as a chord, so kind of a blend between a very slow arpeggio and a chord. We already get a really rich sound from a sample like this if we just play it straight. But we can make it even bigger by doing any one of the techniques we've gone over before. Let's just try layering octaves real quick. So I'll start down here. so now our sample sounds like this. So already a much bigger sound, and we haven't even done anything with the speed or the granular yet, so let's do our old trick, -47, blend halfway, see what that sounds like. A bit too muddy on this octave, so let's go up an octave. And I think our density is down, so let's turn that up. Our reverb also needs to be turned up, I think. There we go, that's more like it. And once again, we can do any of our other techniques on top of this. I won't belabor the point, but I'm genuinely curious about what this sounds like if we go down to -63. Oh, that's pretty cool. This might also be a really cool sample to try changing our direction. Let's try that one. Very nice. Another thing to keep in mind here is that we don't necessarily have to go so big using the results of what we get when we use those techniques we just went over. So the thing to keep in mind here is we have so much sonic information for the Texture Lab to work with at this point that we can do all sorts of other more subtle things. For example, we can turn the density down, turn the grain size down. Let's just hear what this is sounding like. I'm going to hold this note so we can play with it. Turning the timing down. Could play around with the length. Could add in some jitter. And then we could modulate this in all sorts of ways. Turned on the shimmer. And you get the idea. So the way I try to view the Texture Lab in general is that you're taking sonic material, and then depending on how much material you have and how much information is packed inside of it, you can do all sorts of things with it. You can mold it into all sorts of different directions. And the more you have, the more avenues of exploration you have. And there's two basic ways of having lots of information. One is to layer octaves or different intervals, the way that we were doing here. I think of that as layering information vertically. You can also layer information horizontally, meaning melodically. So just to close off here, I'm going to pick another sample, this time a melodic sample, another acoustic guitar sample that I created. And the fact that we have so much information going on horizontally means we have a lot to do with this. If we, for example, hold this note and slow it down, turn up the grains, turn down the size, and then for the ultimate large sound, we could combine the horizontal spread with the vertical spread of sonic information. So here I'm playing two different octaves. And we get a really beautiful, evolving ambient landscape. And as you might have guessed, we can combine that with any of the techniques we went over before. So just to close things off, let's do that real quick. I'm going to re-neutralize our sample. Okay, and now let's do some layering. That's too muddy, something to watch out for here. Don't get too muddy. So let's start here. Doesn't sound that great because of how high-pitched that top sample is, but let's see what we can do with this when we slow things down and granularize it. So first let's record the sample. Okay, and let's hear what that sounds like before we do any manipulation. Okay, so that sounds a bit chaotic, but let's see what happens when we slow things down. Let's try 47 for starters, turn our blend on, make sure our density is up, start with our size up, put a little bit of reverb on, turn the volume up a bit, and let's see where that takes us. Let's see what happens if we turn the speed all the way down. A bit too muddy. Playing around with the size here. Leaning a bit more on the granular side of the blend. So, really big ambient landscape here, and once again we could start layering this more if we wanted to. And you get the idea. So I think this has gone on long enough. I've also lost count of how many techniques I've actually shown you. I think it was 5, maybe arguably more. I guess it depends on how you count them. If you actually get to the end of this video, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to ask me in the comments section. Thanks again. See you again soon. Bye for now.